perform at colleges in red states because those people are ready for comedy. Whereas colleges in blue states, they're offended by everything. They want everything canceled. So you've got very liberal comedians pushing back on cancel culture, pushing back on what CNN has been doing. So they don't even have their traditional audience anymore. So they, at this point, I think CNN really needs to just clean house, fire everybody, bring in new people. Because aside from the content problem, which is what we've been talking about, they've got all these behind the scenes problems. Don Lemon's been accused of sexual harassment. You have the Chris Cuomo with his sexual harassment and what he did with Andrew. You had Jake Tapper's producer and another producer accused of pedophilia. This is what was going on behind the scenes at CNN. So, yeah, CNN just needs to fire everybody and start over.
Yeah, real quick, not to belay, we want to move on and certainly don't want to spend too much time on CNN. What I think is overall that sometimes you can have a really shitty team in a bad division and they can do well, or have a mediocre middle manager when sales are great because of a new product just came out. That's what CNN and MSNBC is. Let's speak really more, focus more on CNN. When it was anti-Trump and all the liberal whack jobs out there were just, flossing at the mouth over this, you could have shitty deliverables, meaning you have Don Lemon, Anderson Cooper, Cuomo, and it suffices. But then when that evaporates and that hysteria is gone, now you're left with basically the emperor has no clothes, the man behind the curtain. Now you're just looking at shitty content and shitty on-air personalities. So there you go. I do believe 100%.
Yeah, they basically used the Trump administration to supercharge their ratings and, hide all of the flaws. Now that they don't have that, you're seeing them for what they are.
No question. Okay, moving on. And there should be, I agree with you, not just trimming around the edges. It needs to be a wholesale, just everyone goes. Again, when we look at CNN and they were talking about all the nut jobs, the Trumpers, and all the unwashed masses, and how the conspiracy theory that they're really overhyping corona deaths. But then it turns out with more than reliable sources that over half of deaths in hospitals attributed to the coronavirus were really other unrelated situations or medical conditions.
Let's clarify that it wasn't just deaths. It was 51% of all the hospitalizations that were classified as COVID related. Turned out these people were hospitalized for something else. And while they were in the hospital, it was discovered that they had COVID. So it's,
and what I heard, I want your opinion on this. My fault, but I stand corrected. But I also heard, and I don't know if this is true, so I'm going to throw it out at you, is that hospitals were more than willing to chalk it up for corona deaths because of financial considerations.
Yes, the government was making higher Medicare and Medicaid payments for COVID-related cases than they were for non-COVID related cases. So it made it easy for the hospitals to say, oh, yes, this is COVID related, so they would get more money. We've seen that over and over. There have been a number of sources that have come out to confirm that.
So maybe all the so-called whack jobs and unwashed masses, maybe they weren't so wrong after all. Again, shame on MSNBC and CNN. A fixation over the last 10 years in the Democratic Party has been really paying more attention to non-citizens than citizens. I have my own thoughts about that, and I'd like yours. Speaking of New York, a initiative to have non-citizens vote in New York City, and then Gavin, the genius Newsom, plan to initiate health care for non-citizens. And before I throw it out to you, I find that offensive healthcare for non. There are so many working poor that skip routine checkups that turn out to be catastrophic health events, scraping by, sacrificing to pay for healthcare, which is extraordinarily expensive. I find it a bunch of bullshit that this idiot, this entitled moron, has the wherewithal and the gumption to propose such an initiative.
Yeah, it really is ridiculous. Several years ago, the United Way did what they called their ALICE study. And I don't remember what ALICE stood for, but it was an acronym. But the people in what they were terming the ALICE group were working people that made too much money to qualify for government aid, but not enough money to survive well on a weekly and monthly basis on their paychecks. So these are the folks that are working, getting paid, are not eligible for these government programs, and yet they have to skip prescription medications because it's a choice of, well, do I take the medication or do I feed my family? And this is not an insignificant group. And yet the Democrats would rather give away services to illegal immigrants than these American citizens that need it.
And when does America rise up? These are so-called they were the Democratic constituency. Those days are long gone. I think there's a title shift in that, and that's a whole nother show. But they were the party of the poor, the working man. Yeah, that train left the station. They're screwing the very people they so-called stand up for or represent, a la Nancy Pelosi.
It's true. They don't stand for the working poor. They don't stand for the poor at all. And I mean, let's face it, Bernie Sanders has been banging the drum for years that the Democrats are the party of the wealthy.
So they are.
Now, again,
and it's really, isn't it funny though, Dr. Lopkin, that I grew up with, it was the country club republic. It's the opposite. It's hysterical.
Well, the thing is, I mean, historically, the Republicans were the party of the working class up until FDR. FDR claimed that right for the Democrats with all of the New Deal programs to get us out of the Great Depression. And with that one move, all of a sudden, the Democrats were the party of the common man. The problem is, other than Lyndon Johnson and the Kennedys, they've never been the party of the common man. This was an aberration of a couple of administrations that decided this is who we have to defend. And they put the Republicans up as, oh, they're the party of the wealthy. It's like, the Republicans were never the party of the wealthy historically. They're the ones that fought for freeing the slaves. They're the ones that fought for everybody to be working. But that's not a great story. So as time goes on, the Democrats took that narrative and by influencing the media spread that narrative. But the fact of the matter is, when you actually look at what the Democrats have done historically, even in recent years, I mean, remember, Clinton was the one that pushed welfare reform.
Mm-hmm.
So the Democrats have never really been the working class party, but they've managed to grab that image through great PR and media manipulation.
But now, that is changing. Really interesting. Go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead,
now you're really starting to see them for who they've been all this time. And clearly they're not all that interested in the working party, in the working class.
But people are leaving the reservation. African Americans, we've talked about this before, Hispanics in the last election were, 50-50 Republican. So I think people are wising up. And I think the Democrats actually are panicking, and I think that's one of the reasons why they're pushing for that what do you call voter rights, voter initiatives, voter reforms that Biden so eloquently articulated the other day. That's really just a grab for votes. They don't really it has nothing to do with voter equity.
No, it's about reaching out to their base and trying to convince their base that they're actually doing something. Biden has been talking about this since Georgia passed its voter security laws. And Biden has been lying about what is in Georgia's law. And the Washington Post called him out on it, gave him 4 Pinocchios. But the party will not let go of the lie. They've been repeating it over and over again. Meanwhile, when you actually look at what's in this voter rights law that the Democrats are trying to ram through,
Makes it easier.
It's rife with voter fraud.
Oh yeah. Oh no, no. My correction. I'm saying the Georgia law, in a lot of ways, makes access to voting easier. The initiative, the so-called initiative with Biden, is just a grab for votes. Essentially, there's no checking. And you can actually, there's a part of it that has to do with voter integrity. You can serve food at polling places. Oh no, there's no room for error on that one.
Well, I'm more concerned about the lack of checks and balances against absentee ballots.
That's exactly the biggest issue.
And the same day voter registration. It would be very easy for me to print up on a home computer fraudulent electric bills that have my usual bill at different addresses in different voting areas. And I could then go use that as proof that I live in that district because they're not checking, it's same day, and cast votes in multiple voting districts for multiple people committing voter fraud. They also are promoting voter ballot harvesting. So you're allowing somebody to go collect other people's votes and then hand them in as though they've been checked.
But it's a common thing.
With problems.
Absolutely, but it's a common theme: allowing illegals to vote. This bullshit with the election changes. It's all about the quintessential fact is that they've lost middle America and they need to make it up. But not only have they lost middle America, they've lost traditional groups in the reservation. Hispanics, they haven't lost them, they're losing them. Hispanics, blacks, and Jews. Correct or not?
Yeah, they're losing these groups. And I mean, even a bigger problem is they can't even hold on to majorities in traditionally blue states because people are leaving those states because they've been run so badly. In fact, just this week, U-Haul announced that so many people were moving from California to Texas that they ran out of trucks in the state of California.
Doesn't surprise me, but it's extremely sad. This is a kind of a weird point, but something that I just see and it kind of bothers me. I love like old TV shows. Okay, you look at a TV shows. I think we've talked about this before from like the '60s, and you see California, the land. I mean, who wouldn't want to go there? How sad! In 60 years, it went from basically the land of milk and honey to the land of shit. I mean, 60 years isn't like, you know, in the big scheme of history, isn't that long. It went from what a great place. Everything was new. Opportunities abounded. The Dodgers moved to LA. Everything. It was amazing. And now it's a place you can't get the hell out of there fast enough.
Well, it's not even 60 years because remember, California was still well run during the Reagan administration.
True.
So it's really less than 40 years that this turnaround has occurred.
Yes, absolutely correct. In fact, after Reagan, I forgot his name, they had a Republican governor. Those days are long gone.